Listening to the radio as you came to church today, listening to songs, what were the songs about? If it was a more contemporary radio station, what were the songs about? They were about a love song, wasn't it? Probably, either somebody singing about a love that they have or a love that they lost. But almost every single song on the radio was about love. Paul McCartney even wrote that song, Silly Little Love Songs, in which he complained that some people say there's too many love songs. But he said, nah, there's room for at least one more. So he made one more. But everything on the radio is about relationships, isn't it? Same thing with movies. Even if you watch a science fiction flick, there's got to be something about relationships. Some people involved in the plot. And that's because people are so important in our lives. No man is an island unto himself, as John Donne wrote so many years ago. And you really see that as we get near death. I mean, people can be fighting. They can hate each other. But what happens when one of those people is on their deathbed? What happens? The one who's not sick, not in the hospital, gets a call from the guy's relative, and they say, come on over to the hospital. My relative wants to talk to you. And what happens? On the guy's deathbed, finally says, look, I got to get over this. I got to put this behind me. I'm going to die, and I don't want to die fighting you. And isn't it sad that it takes something like death to help us to focus on the importance of relationships? But that's about what it ends up being. Because sin has so warped our whole understanding of the importance of relationships. Because of sin, we see everything in a very selfish way. So we see people as what? We see people as objects to be manipulated, to be used. And that's the way we treat people, isn't it? So often. That's the way people in general treat each other. If you don't do what I want, if you don't fulfill what I want you to do, then get away from me. And it's no wonder that we're having such real problems. That's why what Jeff read this morning is so important. What did it say? That we love God? It says God loved us first so that we then can love other people. And that is really the key. We begin to understand how to love people when we experience God's love first in our lives. And that's going to be a key to understanding the parable that we read today. Can I ask anybody, did anybody feel real giddy as you heard this parable? Don't raise your hand, because that would be the wrong thing to do. Doesn't that kind of leave your stomach a little bit empty? These are strong, strong words. But they're powerful words. And they're words that are meant to help us get ready for the day that we die or the day that Jesus comes. And they're certainly words that focus us on people. You look at God's relationship with people, and it's all about a concern for people. The story of the Bible is about God getting involved in the lives of people and showing His love and His care for people. And it's not this superficial type thing. Oh, I love you. You're so wonderful. Oh, you're the greatest. That's not what God says. He just doesn't talk, does He? What's the Bible about? The Bible isn't about talk, it's about action, isn't it? It's about God getting involved in the lives of human beings and rescuing them, giving them what they need most. Words really don't say a lot, but sacrifice says everything, doesn't it? If you sacrifice for somebody else, what does that tell them? Does that tell them you care or you don't care? You care, right? Very interesting. Time magazine startled the world with that particular revelation. They had an article about marriage, and some researchers did some research about why some marriages fall apart and why some marriages stick together. And you know what they discovered? They discovered that the key factor was not money, it wasn't like personality fitting together, it wasn't sex. Guess what it was? It was the ability to sacrifice. They said the more that spouses sacrifice for each other, the more likely they're going to stick together. And then one guy said, if your spouse has an opportunity to sacrifice himself or herself for you significantly to help you out, through a real difficult time and chooses not to, purely selfish reasons. And here's the understatement. He says, that's a problem. Can you imagine that? The person closest to you can help you but doesn't. That shows us what love is all about, sacrifice. Now, has anybody sacrificed for us the way God has sacrificed for us? Look at some of the Romans passages that are in your outline. This is near the end of page 7. It says, God demonstrates His love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Could He offer us any more? You know, we hear that so often. Christ died for us, you know. And you know, I know I'm repetitious. Our Tuesday Bible class is helping me very much on this whole matter of repetition, so I'm trying not to do it. But not being the brightest guy in the world, I got to go back to the same illustration. I know I've said this a lot. Don't worry, it's not the latter one. I know I've said this a lot. But you know, we think that God would, you know, He could solve all our problems by giving us $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. And that really wouldn't solve things all that much. I think it would cause more problems trying to deal with all that money. But what does God do for us? I mean, He takes away the one thing that we can't do anything about. You can make money. You really can. And you can probably make a whole lot more money than you're making right now if you really, really get into it. Maybe you'd have to give up some other things, but you can make money. But the one thing you can't do anything about is dying. You can't do anything about dying. Not one of us can. And that's what Jesus takes care of. He eliminates having to die and not have any options except to hear those words, I'm sorry you didn't want me in this life, you don't want me in the next life. But because of the cross, we're able to stand before God and hear those beautiful words, come, receive the inheritance prepared for you. That's God's commitment to you. Now, if that's the way God values human beings, right? What do you think His plan for us is in regard to other human beings? Don't you think He wants us to value other people in the same way? Well, He doesn't only make the inference, He tells us very clearly. Somebody asked Jesus once, what's the most important commandment? The commandment is God's will for your life. If somebody would say, God, how do you want us to live? We'd look at the commandments. Now, what does Jesus say? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. And then He says, and love your neighbor as yourself. Perfect order, right? We learn from God how to love, and then we take that love out and we show it to the people in our lives. Jesus said the same thing in the Great Commission, just before He ascended into heaven. Some of the last words that Jesus said to His disciples, His followers, were this. He said, okay, all authority has been given to me, in heaven and on earth. Nobody higher than me. Those are pretty significant orders, aren't they? Wouldn't it be cool to get a telephone call from the president? Well, regardless of what party you belong to, it would be pretty cool to hear, this is the office of the president. Wow. That would be pretty cool. All of us would be honored to be asked to do something for the president. God Himself is coming to you. And He's saying, I'm giving you a mission. And He says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. What is that command about? Is it about building organizations? It's about people, isn't it? It's about people. Meeting people where they are, one by one by one, and giving them what they need most, Jesus Christ. So God not only demonstrates His care for human beings, He tells us very clearly that people are to be a priority for us. And you look at the folks that Jesus got the most upset with, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the scribes. What was one of the reasons He got so upset with them? Because they put people on such a secondary level. Think about some of the parables He taught. You remember the one about Lazarus and the rich man?